He has won the British Fantasy Award, the American Horror Award, the Edgar Award, and 8 Bram Stokers. He has been the recipient of the 2007 Grand Master Award for contributions to the field of horror fiction. And tonight he will become the one of the HWA Lifetime Achievement Award winners. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Lansdale. Let's try something right at the beginning.
Sure.
Why did you start writing?
Oh gosh, you know there's no, people always ask that, and there's no easy answer, but you know, I've said this before, and I know some people have heard this, but you know, when I was growing up, I was poor. My father couldn't read or write. My mother had what was essentially a high school education, then was 11th grade in where I was from. And I didn't have a lot of people around me that were interested in reading outside of my mother, but my mother and father were encouraging, so they wanted me to read because they didn't want me to have the problems that my father had being illiterate. So they bought me comic books. Comic books were what made me want to read. That's where I really became a reader, was through comic books. And then that led to me reading short stories, novels, things of that nature.
What age are we talking about?
Oh, I was, you know, I don't want to sound ridiculous here, but I was very precocious. You know, but long before I went to first grade, I was reading. And by the time I was 9 or 10, I was reading the Iliad, you know, and all those sort of things. And by the time I was 11, I'd already wanted to be a writer, and I'd already written stories and poems by the time I was 9. But by the time I was 11, I read Edgar Rice Burroughs. I read A Princess of Mars, and I was doomed then. I already wanted to be it, now I had to be it. And to this day, he's my sentimental favorite author. Certainly he's dated. There's a lot of things you could say that, you know, that it doesn't hold up in some ways. But in other ways, there's a magic that Burroughs has that's lasted with me forever. And so I remember I was doing an interview today with a man who's named John, and his middle name is Carter, John Carter, like John Carter of Mars. And I told him that when I went out, like in the story, you know, John Carter stretches out his arms and looks up to Mars and wants to be pulled across Mars, and he is, or at least his astral body, which becomes a firm body. And I went out in the yard and did that. Carl Sagan did it. Lots of people who read those books did that. And I said, you know, at the time I didn't think it worked, but now when I look back, I think it did work, because I was pulled across the universe, and I have had the most marvelous life, and I got to do exactly what I wanted to do. I've made a good living out of it. I've had a good career. My wife and I talked about it before, I never expected to have this much success. I just wanted to tell stories. And I thought I would eventually get a degree and work as an anthropologist and write stuff part-time, because I didn't want to have a degree in English. I somehow felt that would distract me from doing the work. But what happened is I never finished college, and I was a janitor in a college where I now am writer in residence, which I find funny. But I teach one thing a semester now, one semester, I teach one class a semester. But or one semester a year, excuse me. But what happened is that I did do well, and I got hooked with the movies, I got hooked with comics, just everything fell into place, and I did it by defying everything that I was told to do. And some people might think it was purposeful, knowing my personality. You know, if you push against me, I'm going to push back. Only I'm probably going to push hard. So when people told me you couldn't do something, I decided, yeah, you know what, I think I can. And you know what, I was wrong sometimes. But what happened is that Karen and I had a lot more success than we expected, and it's been really good to me, and I never expected to have any impact on the field at all. I always thought that my stuff would be read and forgotten almost immediately. I just wanted to make a living at it, and originally I just wanted to have it as a sideline. So for me, it's been amazing, and I think the talent that I had to find. I knew I had ability, but I found the talent over time. And it's surprising to me that it's there. It's surprising to me that when I meet people, and I've met many here, and I meet them elsewhere, who say, I read you when I was 12, which of course, you shouldn't be reading some of the stuff I wrote when you were 12. And second of all, I don't like to be reminded that you were 12 when you read my work. But I read you when I was 14. Joe Hill, Stephen King's son, once told me, he said, I read The Drive-In when I was 14. He said, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I thought, wow, that's interesting. And he said, somewhere in the drawer, I think I have a rewrite of one of your novels. But the fact that there are so many people that have read it and been impacted by it, and that it's spread all, you know, to Italy and other places, especially Italy, but certainly, you know, France, and people buy them there. The fact that I've read it all, and the fact that Italy is just such a phenomenal response. The fact that films have picked them. And even though I've only had a couple of films made, they're constantly I don't understand it. And I just thank my lucky stars every day. I'm not a person who believes it's all luck. I mean, people talk about luck are usually people that aren't successful, because that means that, and you judge success in different ways. It's not how rich you are. There are a lot of writers who make a lot more money than I do, but I get to do what I want. And a lot of times you make your own luck. You make your own luck. And a lot of times by listening to other people, you make the wrong luck. You have to decide what's the inner self and do it. And for me, the writing changed my life. I would have been either ended up working in a factory, or I would have been at the university. Those were my two extremes. I felt like I was smart enough and could be educated enough to work in the university, but I felt like I might be very unhappy working at the aluminum chair plant, which I did do. And so I sometimes, the only thing I ever have that's a way of nightmares, never stories, I wake up and I'm working at the aluminum chair plant.
Yeah, I'm back in the Army occasionally.
Yeah, back in the Army.
Two-part question. Was your first writing published writing? And when you started writing, did you, now that you look back on it, did you copy somebody else's style like Burroughs or something to develop your writing?
Well, my first writing was the first thing I ever sold, the first thing I ever wrote for publication. I've been writing since I was 9, but my mother had a magazine called Farm Journal, and they had a contest that they were doing for sort of a letter article. And under her name, which was Orita Lansdale, we wrote a piece on, I guess we call it, putting shrubs in the ground and growing them for therapy. And I wrote this little piece, it's probably about that long, and they bought it, and then it won a prize. And I thought, well, this is easy stuff. and so what happened was that my mother, when we didn't know we'd actually got it, she got the letter she threw it in the trash. And then for some reason, she went back and pulled that letter out and found that we had, been accepted. So I thought, what's everybody, I never met a writer, so I didn't know any better. I read that people had a hard time getting published. I thought, well, it's not that hard. So I decided I'd write another one. Guess what? I published it too. And it just kept going. All nonfiction I wrote, every piece sold. And I said, well, I just think I'll be I'll be a fiction writer, which is what I really wanted to do. And then it wasn't so easy. It got harder. But in about 2 years, I was selling all that. And then by the time I started, 73 is when I sold the first piece, and by 81 I was full-time. Now, I wasn't really making much of a living until 86, and then the worm just turned. There's been ups and downs. If you're in this business, you have ups and downs, and some people, I think, are designed to deal with them better than others. And I think when you come from a poor background like that I did, and you're a martial artist ever since you're 11, none of that stuff scares you much. And I'm a determined son of a bitch, and if I decide that, I'm also confident. I don't know if you noticed that, but I really believe in myself. That doesn't mean I believe I'm always right. I certainly know better than that. My wife lets me know constantly, and she just nodded her head, and lets me know constantly I'm not right, and so does my daughter, and even my dog will look at me once in a while and go. But what I mean is, you've got to have a belief in yourself, which is not an insane belief in always being right or that it's always wonderful, but it's the best you can do at the time.
So the martial arts help with any emotional doubts too?
Yeah.
Gives you the inner confidence?
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you're not disappointed. It doesn't mean you can't get down. I do. And my daughter's in the music business, and she's dealing with the same thing. You get good things, and then you don't. And you get good things, and then you don't. But after a while, if you've been doing it, if you have so many things, you ride on the successful and you don't worry about the others. It's like, and I have to say, most of the reviews I've gotten on my books were like my mother wrote them or something. They've been wonderful. I've certainly had some bad ones, and I've certainly had some mediocre ones, but most of them were just really, really good. But when you get a bad one, I know writers that will get 5 or 6 great reviews and one bad one, and they'll just go into a funk. It bothers them. I just really don't give a damn. And the thing is that if I got nothing but bad reviews, I might give a damn. So I mean, but the idea that a good review justifies what you're doing, or a bad review makes it not justifiable, is ridiculous. And it's always been said, and I always repeat, I think maybe Hemingway said it, but he certainly didn't live by that, but is that if you believe the good reviews, you got to believe the bad reviews, because it's just somebody's opinion. And most of the time, I think everybody's right from their own perspective, from what they come to it. If they don't like it, they're probably right from their viewpoint, because they were looking for a certain thing they didn't get. The only time I will just totally disregard it is if somebody says, oh, I just don't like the subject matter or that they're doing. That's fine, that's your prerogative, but that's got nothing to do with the quality of the book. And then once in a while, you'll have something that you know is a writer who can't succeed or is having a bad time, and that could be any of us, but they take it out on other people because they go, this writer's doing well and I just can't stand this, so I'm just going to give it it's usually on Amazon, you know, some crap review, and then every other word's misspelled and makes no sense, and then a lot of times you can tell they haven't read anything but the cover blurb. But to me, you know, you've got to really believe in yourself, and the martial arts for me gave me the focus. It gave me the economy of motion as a writer. It, you know, in martial arts you get thrown, and sometimes you throw them. Sometimes you get the bear, sometimes the bear gets you. And that's the way you've got to look at it, is that it's the same way with writing. It's just a roll, and you roll back up on your feet, you get back up. It's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get up. And you know, if you get in the ring, you give it your best. And you know, eventually you can look at it like we all lose, we all die. But I don't look at it like that. You know, game over. I did the best I could all the way through. I'm not going out ashamed. You know, I'm not going to go out that I'm trying to kiss everybody's ass to get published. I'm not going to go out try to kiss everybody's ass to do the book that they want me to do. I'm going to do the book I want to do. I'm going to do the story I want to do. If my family needed something, I'd peck shit with the chickens. I mean, I would write under pen names. I'd do whatever needed to be done. But I would always do it as well as I could. And I have, you know. My family's never wanted for anything for me not working. You know, I work just like I did when I was a blue-collar guy, but I don't work as many hours, 3 is all a day.
Well, speaking of work, do you schedule yourself a 3-hour block? Is that what you do?
Well, it's a little bit more free-flowing than that, but I've been tighter in the past. But what I do is, my wife and I, we like to get up at the crack of 9. And, but oftentimes I do wake up early, 6 or 7, and by the time she comes down, I'm through for the day. So, because she doesn't get up all the time when I get up at 6 or 7. But what I like to do is that I get up, I take the dog out, the dog does her business and whatever, and then I have coffee, feed the dog, or I feed the dog, have coffee, go to my desk, and or go usually to my wife's desk where she has hers, and I do my email and a little bit of the fan page stuff to keep up with it. I really don't like doing that, I'm going to be honest with you. I do it because it's part of the business. I enjoy the people, but I mean, I don't really want to take that time because I normally never did it. But it's a nice way, these days since the publishers don't do anything, you have to do some of that. And I always like connecting with people who read my work. Because I mean, I always remember who puts beans on my table. I don't write for you though, but I respect that you put beans on my table. When I write like everybody I know is dead. I don't care what you think. But then I leave that desk and I go to my desk and I sit down, and almost as soon as I turn the machine on, I put my fingers on the keys, it's there. And I don't plot, I don't plan. If I was going to do something working with somebody, I probably would. But I just start writing, and I look up, and I've got 3 to 5 pages, I quit. Unless I'm just really fired up, and then I might write 15, 20, I might write 6, 7. I mean, it can vary.
If the pump is primed.
If the pump is primed, but I always get the 3 to 5. Oh, I say always, 99.9 percentile I do. Once in a while, I'll have a day where I struggle on 1 page or 2 pages. I revise it constantly within that about 3 hours. But if I get through in 30 minutes, I look at that and say, that's good. I'm done for the day if I want to be. If I want to be. And so by usually from 9 to noon, I'm done. And I do that 5 days a week to 7 days a week, depending. The weekends are optional. I often work on my birthday or Christmas because I get up and that's just what I do. You know, I used to work in aluminum chair factories. I worked in mobile home production, you know, being a worker bee. I was a janitor. I worked in the rose fields. I've actually fought for money physically and, you know, done all those things. I've been a bouncer. I've done all that stuff. So I'm not scared of a typewriter or a word processor. And when people say, you know, the writing and they're all, oh, it's such hard work, I go, oh, fuck you. it is difficult work, but you know, if you've done the other, it isn't difficult. It's a gift. You know, it's a wonderful thing.
I'm going to ask you the next question. Don't get pissed off. You're a bad guy. Yes. We talked about this when you were at the store last week about being discovery writers, kind of discovering the story as you're writing it.
Right.
Your writing always seems to be about so much more than the actual story. Whether it's the characters or the heart of the story itself, you really seem to be more concerned about the human condition.
Yeah.
What is it about that, the human condition, that fascinates you so much?
Well, to me, I can't, it's hard for me to imagine somebody that is not fascinated with the human condition.
As opposed to plot-driven, you know.
Yeah, but I think the thing is that it's not that plot is unimportant. I mean, you want to feel like it's got an engine that's pushing it forward and it's going someplace. But the whole idea is that I can get to the end and find out who killed who, or you know, what the mystery was at the end. That may be part of it. That's okay. But what drives me is the characters within the story. And what drives me is the prose. I want the prose to sound a certain way. I want it to have a certain bite. I want it to have a certain rhythm. I want it to be, like Raymond Chandler said, if the last page was torn out of the book, you'd read it anyway. And that's kind of what I'm going after. Am I always successful? No. But I try really hard. And to me, it's that natural storytelling, which is not the same thing as plot. People think plot is storytelling. Plot is a clockwork mechanism that can be very effective, and I can read that sort of thing. But as a writer, I don't mind taking trails off to talk about characters that may, you may want to know more about them, or even peripheral characters that somehow have an impact on the story. The dialogue that if it's not real dialogue, it at least gives you the illusion of real dialogue. And so for me, those are all more important. And growing up when I did, and during the civil rights era and the 60s, that's impacted me so deeply that by the time I matured as a writer, maybe not in the early work, but by the time I matured as a writer, those things have become more important to me. And I've been shocked to find that more and more of my novels are being taught in colleges and high schools and stuff like that. And I thought, really? You know, that's so strange. It's just so strange to me. I mean, it's gratifying, it's satisfying, but it's strange.
With your latest novel, or even with a book like The Bottoms or the Hap and Leonard books, you seem to equally balance the darker and the lighter side. I mean, Hap and Leonard is extremely funny, but it's extremely dark too and violent. What is there about that dichotomy that you like doing, or are you just trying to explore all sides of the...
I think I'm more or less just trying to explore all sides of it, but I think it's how I see life. What's funny is that I have a very grim view of humanity, but that doesn't mean I have a grim view of individuals. You know, I can like people personally very, very well, but I think as a pack we're not very smart. You know, we don't learn from history. We're the biggest screw ups that ever. You know, chimpanzees are looking at us and going, man, look at what they've done. Look at what they've done. We don't learn the goddamn thing. And people say, you know, you have such a dark view of humanity. Yeah, you know, they're right. But that doesn't mean the novels have to be dark, because I'm the sort of person that sees all that. But if anybody here knows me, they know I have a sense of humor. They know I'm friendly, I'm gregarious, I like people. So some people see that as a dichotomy. I don't. I think it's just the human condition. I think Mark Twain was much that way. Like Twain, as I get older, I just feel that we've got less opportunity to recover ourselves, and that we're just going down the toilet like a turd. But I think probably every generation when you get older feels that to some degree, because everything changes. And you also, as you get older, it's harder to see the world as brightly. But when I get up in the morning, I pretty much do see it brightly. When I write, I get that aspect of it out, and then the rest of the day I'm fine. And I think I learned a lot of that from Twain and Robert Bloch, who I think was one of the best at writing humor and it being horror. Although my humor has become considerably different than that. It's not just like a trick ending or whatever, and I'm not knocking that. I love that, and I've done that. I wrote one just the other day for some people that asked me to do a story, and I'm like, wow, I've got one, you know. And that's that moment when somebody says something, you go, oh. You know, and people say, oh, I hated being asked for anthologies when they're themes. I always go, wow, but what can I do with this that would be different? You know, it excites me. But everything has to come from that well of human emotion. It has to come from looking at people. And I read so many, or try to. People will send me things all the time for quotes, and I do give some when I like it. It doesn't have to be a world shaker. If I pick it up and I'm involved, when I get through with it, I might not remember it next week, but if I enjoyed it, it's great. And those that I know I'm going to remember forever, I give great quotes. But I get so much stuff, and it's just like, you know, so much of it seems to be vampires and, you know, and the vampires have no characterization. It's just, or the people have no characterization. And I look at it and I go, I wonder what it is that's appealing about this. You know, and it's not because it's vampire fiction. I love vampire fiction if it's Salem's Lot, I Am Legend, Progeny of the Adder, you know, things that have some real depth to them. But just so I can get the joke, or, you know, you can have a romance with a vampire. You know, after how many times has that been done? When does that get old? You know, when does that get tired? So I get these books that usually, you know, and their idea of characterization is the guy's got a limp. Or he's got an eye patch. That's not characterization. There used to be somebody that was telling me that I have all these little cards, and I take one out that says alcoholic, blind in one eye, can't see out of the other one, you know, that kind of thing. And so that's not characterization. It's not even near characterization. That's just, you know, it's a trait. But how do they feel about having a patch? How do they feel about having a limp? What caused it? All of those are the things that interest me, and how it changes people. You know, what if Hitler had been a successful artist? Would that have changed things? Maybe not, maybe so. But it's just that little turn of the dial of human beings that interests me, and the fact that no matter who we are, that dial will flip back and forth a little. You know, I have a set of ethics, and I have, and I stand by them, and I don't cross that line. But I also know that nobody's 100% anything. And so as a writer, I'm always exploring those aspects within me that are within everybody. People say, oh, I just, that's so dark, you know, I just not like that. I say, well, yeah, you are. But you're also like the other side. You're just denying one side. And that's okay, you know. But for me, recognition of it doesn't mean that I have to perform that way. I mean, I have a set of ethics that I stand by. I stand by my family, I stand by my friends, I stand by my ethical beliefs that I believe are ethical. You know, people might argue that. But there's a line I won't cross. It has nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do with morality as we think of it as associated with theology, but as it's associated with personal ethics. You know, it's like, so people are so funny. They say, well, if you don't believe in religion or God, well, you know, what do you believe in? I believe in me. I believe that that's all I got, and that my family and people like that, we're all extensions of each other. And I believe in the family I created. You know, there are certain people who have become my family that are not my blood at all. But I believe those things matter. I believe in friendship, and I believe in doing the best you can when everybody else may not be. Well, character is what you do when nobody's looking, is the old saying. And that is important to me in writing. Sometimes I'll take the absolute other view. I'll take the unethical, the dark, the absolutely worthless person and write about them because I'm exploring that aspect, because I think you're trying to understand it. Sometimes what I'm doing is I'm trying to understand, where is this person coming from? And then you start to understand that all of these people have some essence that is you as well. But you got the right family, or you got the right money or lack of money. In my case, being poor helped me. It was one of the best things that ever happened to me. I had such good parents. And so all of that, to me, is what makes a story. It's what makes a novel. I'm just really not interested in just something that's purely about plot. And that's why I like mysteries about who killed who in the other room, and, you know, finding a feather in dog shit, and now I know how he did it. I'm not interested.
Well, it's like we were saying, there are certain arts, songwriting, book writing, dance, that the idea of the art is while it's going on.
Yeah.
It's not to
It's
get
the
to
process.
the end. It's the process. Otherwise, the fastest singer wins, is what we had said. So the idea is the process, and none of the other arts are like that. Painting is you want the end result.
Yeah.
As a viewer, or sculpting, or any of that. But as you're reading a book, or playing music, or in dance, it's the process.
Yeah. Well, I think for some people it is the ending, because they want to know if they figured it out. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to say that people that like that, you're wasting your time. You are. But I'm not. No, you're not. But I think ingenuity is also important in a book, and just taking something that's so, that seems like it doesn't link up at all, and finding these connections. Oh, I see Stephen right here, Stephen Graham Jones. This is a guy that does that about as good as anybody. This guy is a great writer that more people need to know about. If you don't know about him, Stephen, hold your paw up. I don't mean to embarrass you. He's a shy guy, but
Little fella.
Little fella.
Yeah.
I call him Junior. Steve, get on over here, man. But writers who take chances are the ones I like. Philip Jose Farmer, who I just loved and admired so much, he always said, you know, he said, man, a lot of my stuff it didn't work, but he said it's like you need to be willing to go out on the limb and saw it off while you're sitting on it. You got to take those chances. You got to do it, or nothing happens. If you don't push it, nothing happens. It doesn't mean pushing always has to be that the story is so absurd or crazy, although I've certainly done that, and I like that too. It can be a very natural story, but to push the characters, to push what they're going for, to push your expectations. People read so much to get the same damn story over and over and over. Now, as a writer, I'm going to repeat certain themes. It's impossible for me not to. And there are going to be things of mine that are very much alike. But I've always tried to bring something new. And I'm not saying I'm always successful, understand. But I'm always after bringing something new. And I'm always wanting to bring something of me. I don't care what's popular. You know, I mean, I want, you know, I read all kinds of things. I want to be able to sell it. I want to be able to make a living. But what I've found is that by creating a Lansdale genre instead of an individual mystery, horror, crime, whatever, even though I may be published under those labels, people mostly that read me don't go to it for mystery or horror. They go to it for Lansdale. And I had a decision a long time ago. I remember when they were doing the splatterpunk thing, and I had some books some stories and maybe a book that had been listed in that. That's fine, you know, those may fit, but I refused that label. People kept, you know, all the splatterpunks, and I said, I'm not doing that, because I also wrote The Magic Wagon, which is nowhere near a splatterpunk story. I may have written The Drive-In, I may have written The Night Runners, or Dead in the West, or something like that. But I also have written The Bottoms. I've written A Fine Dark Line. I've written Sunset and Sawdust. I've written my crime novels, which are sometimes a mixture of those. So as soon as you can put a label on it, it's too late. It's all over.
You write a lot of violence, and I mean both emotionally and physically. There are characters that literally get crushed in your books. Is that when you are exploring the morality that is not you as the person,
Sometimes.
but the inkslinger in you, the bent that...
I think you have to say both, you know, and I think most of the time, a lot of the fiction I write is some sort of metaphorical idea, you know. When I've written about races, I've had some people think, oh, you know, you must be racist. And I say, did you read the story?
Yeah.
Did you read the story? And that these guys are racist, and you somehow think that reflects, and if you can't understand a certain word, if you can't take that word and put it in context, some people may be racist. The story may be able to tell you, but if you're too dumb, I'm not your Cliff Notes, you know. You figure it out.
Well, sometimes I almost felt like you challenge yourself in ways, like say,
I do.
Hap and Leonard, I've got
Oh, yeah.
blacks and gays and this and
Yeah.
that, and instead of actually putting you in the hole, what it seems to do is open your Pandora's box and give you opportunity.
It does, and you know, a lot of it happens, I don't really plan that though. When I wrote Savage Season, the first Hap and Leonard book, I had no idea that Leonard was even going to show up, and then I had no idea that he was gay until we got into it. When the reader discovers it is when I discovered it, and you find that out. And I thought, well, you know, gay people I know are just as variable as, you know, there are those that are obviously, you know, the flaming gays, as they call. And then there are those that you would never know. And that's the same way with heterosexuals. You have some that are, you know, obviously going to fit a certain stereotype, and those that fit it less so. And I mean, it's just a silly thing, really.
Right.
And so to me, that character developed, and at the time I wrote it, that was reasonably radical. It's not that no one had ever written about a gay, Joseph Hansen, for example, had written about a gay detective, and it was very realistic, good stuff. But it was still not widely accepted, and also people think, oh, you know, oh, being a character being black doesn't matter. But you know what? After Barack Obama was elected, we discovered that we're a lot more racist than we think, because you see all these incredible things, or people like trying to make him one of the others, and he's from somewhere else. If you don't like his politics, that's fine. That's your choice. But I mean, it's just these things to me are what make the book go, because I'm interested in all of these things that I see. I know other writers say, you know, I don't want to write anything that might offend the reader or distract from the reader. Fuck the reader.
They're dead anyway.
Yeah, they're dead anyway. And then when you get to, because the reader you're trying to find is the reader that likes what you're doing.
Right.
You know, but I'll be damned if I'm going to try to figure out what every individual in here likes, because they're not the same. They're all different. So if I try to figure out what they, you know, Stephen's probably going to like it. There's something wrong with Stephen back here. You know, he and I are on the same page. We really are. But generally, I don't write for Stephen. I don't write for you. I don't write for my wife. My dog, I kind of like try to pay attention to a little bit. She's got some smart. She's a great guide. But no, really, seriously, I don't. And I go back to that thing. I always have that saying: I write like everybody I know is dead.
Do you read any?
And of course, when I get through, I hope everybody loves it. Don't misunderstand me.
Do you read your writing after you've written it, like books ago?
Not unless I have to. I mean, sometimes I find like a mistake. I mean, and they pop up. You know, you have them. and you feel bad about it. Then you realize that they have novels that they're selling Hemingways with mistakes in them. I thought, well, if it's good enough for him, I guess some guy like me can, you know. So I try to correct them in other editions when I can.
Right, that leads to the thing. Do you ever want to go back and change stuff?
No. I remember Dean Koontz wrote some early novels, and he revised those totally, and I thought, wow, I'm just not in that place at all. Because I don't want to rewrite my history. You know, this is my history. I'm proud of it. This face, this ragged face, I earned every goddamn wrinkle. You know, some of it's from most of it's from getting old, some of it's from getting hit and doing martial arts and stuff like that. You know what? I can live with that. And so to me, I can live with the same thing with my books or my stories as I wrote them. You know, if I go back and see words misspelled, or I could have changed a comma, that's different. Mechanics, yeah. Or I made a fact. I said to one that was a fact that was wrong. That's different. But to rewrite them and become somebody else, you know, I've got.
You don't want to George Lucas the.
No. I'm proud of what I've accomplished, and you know what? If you can't look at it and see that you've gotten better, if you can't look at it and see that you've evolved as a writer and a person, then what's the whole point of this? Because I don't believe I'm going to get the big prize in the end, to heaven, you know. Because most of the people I think that are going, I wouldn't want to see them.
I remember when we had one of those come to the door proselytizing. And I said to him, honestly, you're telling me if I change my lifestyle and change everything, my reward is eternity with you?
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. There was a guy that I met, and a really nice guy, and unfortunately I can't remember his last name. His name is Jack. And Casey, my daughter, is a friend with him and she knows him, but she on Facebook originally. And she moved to a fan page because she didn't want to get into all these arguments and things, because she is concerned with her career as a country singer, that she doesn't get over into the fact that she has certain beliefs that might not fit the country music thing. And she knows it's me, so I just don't care. You know, I'm going to do what I do. But Jack was on there, and somebody who he had written about being an atheist, and this other person wrote back, well, how can you not believe in God? And he wrote back, says, do you believe in Islam? And they said, no. He said, like that. And I don't care if you believe the big boogie boo is your day. That's your deal. Just don't put it on me, and don't put it in politics and education, because it's just a belief. And most of the time, it's wherever you're born, that's your belief, and wherever your parents were, that's your belief. Whatever comfort food you need, that's your belief, and that's the hole you run to when everything fails. God is great, and in the sense that they always say God is great because He did all this for me. When things go wrong, it's just God's will. That son of a bitch can't lose.
Yeah. You said something interesting last week. You mentioned, and we think of you primarily as a novelist, and yet you mentioned that you enjoyed writing short stories more than novels.
Absolutely, I do. I enjoy writing novels. I've seen some people say, "Oh, he doesn't like the novels." I don't like his novels because he really wants to write short stories. And that's not true. I just prefer short stories. But I love writing novels. I would hate having missed out. I've enjoyed writing screenplays, even though none of them ever got filmed except for the Batman the Animated Series stuff. I love writing comic books, but there's nothing to me like prose. Short stories first, novels second. I love the fact that I can go to so many different realms and different areas and make sometimes I can just be clever. Sometimes I can have a psychological impact, or talk about certain cultural things. And sometimes it's just reconnecting with the pulps and with dime novels. And I just love them. Novellas are actually my favorite, which I usually just say short stories, but things in novellas give me a chance to develop characters, and yet it gives me a chance to do quirky ideas. The thing about, somebody once said a novel is an easy way to write a short story. They're right. They're right.
I interviewed Peter Straub one time, and he said, I honestly don't know how people write that little.
Well, as I get older, I find that it's a little harder for me to write the really short, but I still do it. I make myself do it from time to time, because I think it's a way of keeping myself alert, and teaching myself, and making sure that I'm not getting too fond of myself as a writer. Because that happens. I mean, you should reach a certain level of confidence. You should reach a certain level of feeling that you know what you're doing, but you should never reach a level that you know absolutely what you're doing.
Right. Well, and it also helps when you Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter's
so that keeps it down. I know that Bubba Hotel was made into a great film by Coscarelli with
Right.
Bruce Campbell and the late Ozzie Davis,
Yeah.
the late great Ozzie Davis.
Great Ozzie.
Yeah, and that had dark and light sides too, and explored the human condition dichotomy, especially that whole Elvis, where's your head? You were exploring a character that was way off center, but still had all of the traits that all of us had. Now I've heard things mentioned here and there about a sequel or a television, or where are you at as far as the entertainment industry?
For Bubba Hotel?
For Bubba Hotel and anything else that's now
I
coming
don't
down
think
your pipeline?
I don't think there should be a sequel. I don't think, you know, Don and Bruce wanted to do a sequel, and they talked to me about it, and they got somebody to do a screenplay, and Bruce didn't like the screenplay. He wanted me to do a screenplay. I would have probably broke down for Bruce and Don, because friendship, you know, that's more important to me than a lot of other things. But I don't think there really should be a sequel to Bubba Hotel. I think I said it all. And the version they did, which was written by Don Coscarelli from a screenplay, actually was 95% that story. The other 5%, the changes they made, some of them I liked, some of them I didn't. I understood why he did most of what he did. I think it's a great adaptation. You know, it was one of those redemptive stories. Why come back and ride that coattail? I know a lot of people want to see it. Oh, that's cool, but you know, I'm not really sure it is. Then they'll be going, why are they just making sequels? And they're right.
Or a series.
Yeah, or a series. And I think, like Bruce said, at least he doesn't get too old to play the part.
Yep. Your characters, when you're writing, because you are someone who basically hangs the clothes of the characters on a clothesline and finds out where they go.
Right.
Do they ever run away from you?
Yeah, sometimes they do, and I've had to pull them back, and then I've had them run away from me when I realized, you know, there's a book about this guy, you know, and so I would take that and expand on it and go someplace different with it. But and I think after I've been doing it a while, I have a sense of when it's running away a little bit. But I always like the novelists that I loved, you know, the ones I really enjoyed, and let the characters run away a little bit. I like these side trails, and I like finding out about that character, finding out about this event. I won't tell you the thing, but An Edge of Dark Water, which, by the way, I think is my best novel. I'm real fond of it. Ask me 6 months from now, you know. So.
Yeah.
But there's a character in there that sits down and tells a story that's a story within this story. And so I always like that sort of thing. Mark Twain was wonderful at that. Stephen King, when he's on, he's wonderful at that. It's kind of like he'll veer off in the story. You know, Flannery O'Connor told these little precise stories, but there was always this feeling that there was this story behind the story that I was getting some information about. Harper Lee and To Kill a Mockingbird, there were all these stories going on that all came together. But when you see the movie, which is great, I love it, but what people don't know is how much is left out. If you go back and you read the book, there's all these side stories, and there's a wonderful visit that Scout has with the women of the town that's not in there. And it could not have actually been the best adaptation of a film you can imagine, you know, but, I mean, of a book that you can imagine. But for me, that's what interests me, is these little side
And
stories.
that's not the plot. That's the thing that brings another piece to the character.
No, that makes you understand the
Right.
people in it better, so that you believe what happens to them better.
So with the characters that you have, which many are outrageous, crazy characters, how do you keep them from turning into a caricature?
Sometimes you play the character, sometimes you play the stereotype, but most of the time you keep it from happening by connecting constantly with things that we all deal with and that we all experience. And what's also funny is some of the really wild characters aren't that made up. Sometimes I'll know somebody like that, and I'll go, you know, people that's really stretching it. And to take something in fiction that you know is crazy, but is also probably real, and try to convince the reader is part of the challenge. Sometimes you fail, sometimes you get it. You know, like I said, sometimes you get the bear, sometimes the bear gets you.
When you first started writing, did you do a lot of, or even now, do you do a lot of basing on people or traits from different people?
No, I never consciously, but sometimes when I'm writing, I will realize that somebody that I've seen or known or met will be an inspiration. Like when in the Happen Leonard books, when I wrote the character Brett, she was based on a woman I met, plus some things of my wife, some things with the people I knew. But this woman I met looked exactly like that I see Brett now. And that was probably maybe 30 years ago. I was on book tour. She was the person that drove me around. But she was the funniest, foul-mouthed individual. And she was just tough. And she was very pretty, but she was tough. And I said, she exemplifies the Texas woman. Because a lot of Texas women that would be, I hate that damn feminism. They're the most they're doing it. They're tough. They're living their life. They're taking care of stuff. They're whipping your ass. You know, whatever it needs to do.
Leanne Richards.
Yeah, and they got a razor in their shoe. Yeah. Was that old Rye Cooter thing? Don't mess with women from Texas. You know.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I understand you have another Happen Leonard coming our way, novella or
I
novel
have
from Subterranean.
Novella. Yeah.
Novella. Are you exploring a side story with that?
It's a side story. They're lighter usually, and they're just little side stories that you know I want to do until I get ready to do a novel for Happen Leonard. My next novel won't be a Happen Leonard, and I'm not sure when they will return because again, I write when they speak to me, you know, not when I try to force them to speak.
Right. That Quinn Yarborough said to me last week, I know I finished writing my novel when my characters quit talking to me.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, when I wrote Savage Seasons, it was 3 years later when I wrote Mucho Mojo. I never intended to write a series. There was supposed to be a series. Savage Season was a standalone. But 3 years later, I wrote a novel for Mysterious Press. It was a good novel, but it was really dark. It's the one that became Waltz of Shadows. But it was, they were looking at it and they went, whoa. And I said, well, you know what? I'm not revising it. I'm not rewriting a novel I like. I'll just pull it. But I'll write another novel, but it'll be the novel I want. And if you like it, fine. So I rewrote it. They liked it. And that became Mucho Mojo because Hap, when I started writing it, he started talking to me again. He just said, you know, yeah, by the way, I'm not through. Where the hell do you think you're going?
I think Anne Rice is the one that said, I know I finished writing when my husband puts a bottle of champagne in the refrigerator. So, why do you think Edge of Dark Water is your best novel today?
I think it probably has to do with being older, and I think it has to do with writing a lot. I think it has to
more
do
mature.
More mature, I think so. You know, there are a lot of people, I like the early work, I don't like the later work. Well, you know, sometimes that's true, but a lot of times what I found is that when I was younger, I would go, well, I like this stuff, I read them. The stuff he's doing now I don't like. Now that I'm older, I like that stuff better because I've changed. You know, I've changed. And I think that as a writer, that's true. But, you know, I'll turn around and write something totally different next time.
And you ever going to write another Western?
Yes. That's all I'm going to say right now.
That's it. That question was for me.
Yeah.
This one, yeah. You've contributed to animation and comics.
Yep.
Which is very much script writing.
Yep.
Do you have any novels currently open, or currently optioned for the screen, and do you want to write the screenplays for them as you did for A Fine Dark Line?
Yeah, Fine Dark Line, that fell through, but I wrote the screenplay for that, and that's still out there. But The Bottoms, the actor Bill Paxton and I are working on. He and I are trying to produce it. Right now, he's going to direct Kung Fu, the movie version of the old TV show. And when that's done, that might bring him enough clout. And you know, he's already did the Frailty, which was good. You know, Kung Fu might not be exactly where it's going to put him in the sense of like maybe like this is a great directing job. Although it may, who knows what they're going to do. It depends on the script. It's never the subject matter; it's the script. Most of the time, when they go back and mine old television shows, though, it just doesn't work. But I have a feeling with Bill, it just might. Because Bill's a very, very conscientious guy. He's a really well-read guy. He's a really smart guy, and another ethical right down the line, like Bruce Campbell. You know, that's why Bruce Campbell lives in Oregon and he's in Miami shooting the show. He doesn't have anything to do with Los Angeles. He doesn't like them.
Right.
You know, because he won't play their game. He could have been like a super major star, but he's not kissing ass, you know? I mean, sometimes it's okay to pucker a little as long as you're not really going too far.
No doubt.
Yeah, I mean, The Bottoms, Greg Nicotero, who is the special effects guy for The Walking Dead, and has also directed an episode. We're trying to do the drive-in. We have a really good script from Steve Romano. We have a good script from Brent Hanley for The Bottoms. Bill and I do, and Brad Wyman for The Bottoms, which Brent Hanley wrote Frailty, the screenplay for Bill before. And Bill wanted, you know, he's comfortable with this guy as a screenplay writer. He's a great screenplay writer. I also have Cold in July, which they have a good screenplay on that, and they have some people, big names interested. We'll see how that goes. And The Big Blow, Ridley Scott has and has had for some time. I did a screenplay. It was like the greatest screenplay ever written until nobody would do it because it was too dark. Now it's not the greatest screenplay ever written.
It changes.
It changes, and now there's a new screenplay writer. The director is the guy that did Rampart. I never can remember his name. It's like Oren something or another. I don't recall exactly. But a lot of those are there, and they're all options. There's some interest in a Happen Leonard TV series. There's some interest in a Sunset and Sawdust TV series. I cash the checks. I move on. And I've written a number of screenplays and sold them. I'm almost at the point where I'd really have to be jazzed to write a screenplay again, because I'm so deeply involved in prose, and I just feel like it's like I'm coming to my own. I'm 60, but man, I feel like I'm 20. You know, I feel great.
We got about 5-10 minutes at the most, and I thought we'd take a few questions from you folks. Anybody got anything? If not, we can keep yapping. So, Steve?
Yeah, I was going to say, in your intro on Preacher Comic, you mentioned that Garth didn't quite get the Texas language.
Garth didn't have a clue about that.
How
but it's great stuff. I mean, I love those comics. I mean, they were awesome. And I loved writing that intro. But the Texas stuff, he's not even close. He's not within 100 miles of it. But he was influenced by my stuff, you know, and he says so himself. You know, and one time when I met him, it was at an AggieCon. He got down and did the, you know, thing like this. And but he's his own man. He's doing his own thing. But it's like a Britisher's view of Texas. But I just see it as an alternate universe Texas, and I just think those things are just wonderfully, weirdly terrific.
I was just going to say that I guess it's safe to assume that Sue Ellen and Jinx are a little closer on spot for what you would hear down there. And I thought it was interesting. The wisest character appears to be Jinx, and the youngest character also.
Jinx is
really an integral character to the whole story. And if you could just, the character is fascinating. Yet there's a lot we don't know about Jinx.
Yeah, and Jinx is Leonard Pine's grandmother. That has not been revealed, but it doesn't matter that you know that or don't know it. But that's who is his grandmother, and so you can see where Leonard comes from in Jinx.
Right.
But I thought Jinx represented a lot of people I knew. When I was a kid, racism was so heavy and it was everywhere. But the South had its own special kind of terrible racism. I saw some terrible stuff, and it affected me deeply. And it doesn't mean I saw lynchings or anything like that, but I mean just mistreatment of people and degrading people and people. I've seen grown men, white men, have some black man who's older than them calling them boy and saying and telling these terrible things about this is how niggers are, and then say that right, and the guy go, yes, that's right, and he's thinking, you motherfucker, you know. But he has to put up with, or had to then. So for me, when the civil rights movement came, I mean, that was something that touched me deeply. And my father was a racist, but he was also somebody who was a racist verbally, but not in his actions. And that does not completely exonerate you.
He talked a good game.
But one time I always think about this is that we were coming back from visiting relatives, and it was raining. It was horrible rain. And it was funny, as a kid, as writers tend to have memories that are, I think, stronger than a lot of other people. And they're not always accurate, but they're the memories we have, they're the mythology we create, but they also have at their core the reality of what happened. And there was a car over the side of the road, and the rain was so tremendous, and it was just like moving our cars. The first time I realized that, you know, there's something more powerful. Nature is more powerful than human beings. Floods, lightning, and all that will get you. And even my dad, who was taught me first boxing and wrestling, and he went to county fairs and stuff during the Great Depression, rode the rails and fought for money. And even he couldn't protect me from nature. But this car that was pulled over the side of the road, there was the hood was up, and there was a black man leaning in there working, and in the car itself there was a woman and some children. And my dad pulled over, went back, got his tools out of the back, crawled under the car with the water running over it, fixed that man's car. And he got back in the car, and I remember looking at him because I knew what he said. And he said, well, those kids were with him. So I knew the true nature of my father. And I never saw him mistreat. I saw him stand up. He couldn't stand a bully. All of us Lansdales are like that. The worst thing you can do is try to intimidate me or try to bully me, because you're going to get your ass whipped, or I'm going to die trying. Because I don't want to be intimidated. I don't mean you disagree with me. That's different. But when people try to, I mean, I like disagreement. I love, you know, talking and things. But if you try to intimidate me, you're in for it. My daughter is like 5'5", weighs about 120 pounds or something. You don't intimidate her. You don't intimidate my wife. You don't intimidate my son. We will not tolerate it. And I don't just mean physical. I'm talking about, you know, you're not going to just make me do something because you're going to try to bully me. I don't like bullies. Anything about anybody else?
Well, there was one question I had when you were talking about your life. You have your 3-hour routine in the morning, and you just open that door.
Roughly 3 hours.
Roughly, you work. So after the 3 hours, you close the door and you go out to go on with your life, or does it ever carry on a little bit?
I'm sure it does. I mean, you know, I try to do all my stuff subconsciously so that I live my life and it doesn't overwhelm me. You know, every once in a while, certainly, you know, you're aware of it or it hits you consciously or something, you'll go, oh, that will be good for the book. But most of the time what I do is I go in at night, I go to bed, and I don't think about it. And when I wake up in the morning, it's there like a gift, you know. And I really have a real problem with people that, oh, it's such hard work. And you know, they think, well, if it's easy, it must be bad. I don't think so. I think it can be easy and be horrible. I think it can be hard and be horrible. And I'm not saying and when I say that too, it doesn't mean I don't have days when I work hard, and I have days when it's difficult. But I'm talking about comparing it to other things that I've done in life. Now, don't get me wrong, it's hard work. It's a hard way to make a living. It's a hard way to make a buck, because at least if you go in a factory, you got that job every day, and you can probably move over to something similar. Not for certain, because you know these days a lot of people are looking for jobs. But for me, it's just a joy to get this opportunity to do what I like, you know. And I sort of have a natural bent toward it. But I worked hard. You know, I don't have to take off my hat to anybody.
Beats a shovel.
Beats a shovel. Been there. When my mother told me, she said, if you don't get a college education, you're going to end up digging a ditch. First job I ever got was digging a ditch.
Did you have a college education?
No.
She was a genius.
Yes, she was.
Last thing I think is we have a lot of new writers, fledgling writers, people just getting going. Anything about writing in general that you would throw at them at the early stage like this?
Read, and then put your ass in a chair and write. That's it. And don't read in one particular genre. Read all sorts of things, and listen to music, and see films, and interact with people. Have a life. Right? You know, don't write everything that has the stink of the library about it, or it's like somebody else's stuff. Oh, they got a you know, zombie thing. I'm gonna do one like it. If you're gonna do one unlike it. You know, and just by deciding that the zombies, you know, wear red does not really change things.
Nobody else?
No last minute?
Thank you.